Welcome everyone to Agile Coaching Roundtable. Today is the 14th session, and topic for today is the definition of done. And let me just share my screen, and we can just talk about it. Let me know if you guys are able to see my screen.
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for confirming. Okay, can anyone tell me what is definition of done, or have you used in your project ever? Can you just tell me about what is your understanding on definition of done? When
It
anyone,
can be means a standard across the stories, means the story has been developed, tested, and it has met all the acceptance criteria defined in the story.
yes, yes, you are right. Any other point or any other definition by anyone? Anything
Definition
else?
of done is created while the first sprint starts, if I am not wrong.
Yes. Okay. I think most of you are already right, and you have got it already. So on that note, let's get started. Okay. So this is the definition of done by Google. Uh, I'm just turning off my camera for quality issues. So what Google says is the definition of done is an agreed upon set of items that must be completed before a project or a user story can be considered complete. So as Ambalika has mentioned, so it's the checklist that we can say, which tells us or which validates the work that we have done in a sprint. Okay, so what is that checklist all about? So the checklist consists of all the necessary activities or steps that should be passed or that should be completed before we can mark any work item as completed, which is in line with the product increment. So that is what a definition of done is. And this definition of done, I must say it is the most ignored part of this entire Scrum framework, wherein what most of the people do is that they just maintain this list and they just never get bothered about it. They don't refer to it, or what people do is people just try to have this checklist or this document and put it in the Confluence or whichever tool that is possible as a repository that we use, and we just open it when the audit takes place. So that is what most of the people do with definition of done. What I would highly recommend is that every project, whichever is running on Scrum, should have a definition of done defined. So in this course of this entire topic, we would be covering different topics, subtopics, such as what is the characteristic of definition of done, why is it important, who should be writing it, and all of that. And towards the end of this session, I would be also giving you some top tips which would be aligned with this topic, or how can you better utilize this definition of done in your projects. All right. So now that we have seen what is the definition of done, let's see the characteristics of DOD. And I would definitely expect you guys, this session to be interactive one, because there is not much to cover in this topic because it is a very small topic. We might also complete or end this call soon. But if we have any questions or anything, any point of views that you want to put across, please feel free to do so. Okay. Uh, Coming to characteristics of definition of done, how should your definition of done look like? So it should be short, measurable checklist. Though we are saying it's a document, it's a checklist, it should be short enough. It should not be like a lengthy document that we are going to just uh, write as a proof of concept, or like some scope document or some planning document. It should be very short, crisp, and it should be measurable checklist. What do you mean by measurable? Measurable by meaning, I mean is that whatever points that you include in the checklist, you should be able to measure those points, measure your work items against those points, against those points. That is what I mean. So it's not just for a namesake that you want to just maintain the checklist, but you should be able to measure the points, the checklist items against each work item that we are going to contribute towards the product increment. And second characteristics is that when we maintain this checklist or DOD, it's kind of a exit criteria that we must say, so that or a exit gate, which means that all the work items of a sprint that pass through this gate means that everything is complete. We have reached the finish line in terms of development, and no pending work is required further on that particular work item. So it is very important that we have this point in mind, that whenever we write or work on a definition of done, we should keep in mind that that should be the final kind of a finish line for any work item. If we say that there are some bugs open, or maybe if we say that some of the points are still pending to be developed or to be worked upon, then that means we are not following the definition of done criteria. So whichever user story that we pass through this gate, exit gate, should be completed thoroughly, and no pending item, pending work should be mentioned. So that is the second characteristics of definition of done. Third is, it should talk about how shippable product should be, which means that as I mentioned, it it should comply to all the all the checklist points, and all work items should comply to that checklist. We are saying that once all the work items have passed through that gate, we mean that it has got all the ingredients that are required to say that this product increment is shippable now. When I say shippable, that doesn't mean that it is releasable, but shippable. It is ready for release is what we are saying. So when do we say that it becomes releasable? Once our PO approves that, okay, now customer wants us to release it. So that means it is a releasable. So there would be some points which would be pending from shippable to releasable. Those points mostly could be related to approvals for production release. That's it. So what I mean is, your checklist should be such that it should talk about all the ingredients that should be required, that should meet the needs of all the shippable product increment that your product increment should have. So these are the characteristics of definition of done. So whenever you write the definition of done, so please keep in mind that these points should be catered when you write a definition of done. Who decides definition of done? It's not the Scrum Master alone. It's not the product owner alone. It's the entire Scrum team who decides upon who would be working on the definition of done list? Anyone has seen this deviation, or anyone feels that it should be done by Scrum Master or product owner, or anyone is following otherwise, that it is maintained or it is written by Scrum Master and Scrum Master dictates or product owner dictates the definition of done? Anyone who has
Uh,
faced this?
yeah, hi Ramya, Mohan here.
Yes, Mohan.
As per my understanding, which what the reading I went through, that I came to know the product owner and the project manager are the DOR and DOD is ready in the PI planning or sprint planning meeting, and they are taking the ownership or they are maintaining it.
Okay. First of all, I would say that, I mean, that is partially correct, to be very honest. First thing is that there is no role of a project manager here in Scrum, right? So all the roles that we have is Scrum Master, Product Owner, and a development team, right? So and all these roles together are called Scrum team. So in that sense, it's the collaborative efforts. The point that you mentioned, that product owner along with the project manager, it should be product owner along with the Scrum Master and development team. So all these three roles together, or a Scrum team together, sits and decides what should be the definition of done. Why it is required that everyone should be involved in this? Because it is the development team who is going to work on the development activities. It is the team who is going to ensure that we are complied to this definition of done. So it is very important that we get their buy-in this. So without their involvement, we should not take this decision. We as in Scrum Masters or product owners should not take a decision on a definition of done criteria. It has to pass through them and they have to approve it. Okay, these can be points that we can include as a definition of done.
Can
Okay.
I ask one question in addition to this?
Yes. Sure.
So suppose if we are in sprint planning, so as I said, or I came to know the DOR and DOD is ready. So we are confirming that we are finishing the, or we are in sprint planning, and when the user stories are picked, it means DOR is started executing, and the sprint review is done. It means DOD is it is confirmed.
Yes. Yes. So if your user story does not meet definition of done, then according to me, or even according to some of the famous sites, articles in some of the famous sites, we are not even supposed to show that work item in the sprint review if it does not meet the definition of done criteria. If your definition of done criteria also includes a point wherein a PO should sign off, then that's a different story. But if that point is not included, if the definition of done criteria has the points to the step before that, before the sign off, then definitely if it has not met the definition of done criteria, it should not be even part of the sprint review. And once it is complied, once your work item is complied to the definition of done, that means that yes, we have completed everything in that story and it is good to go now. I hope I answered your question. Mohi. All right. What does DOD uncover, or what are the points that gets exposed with DOD, or what is the transparency, on which area we get that transparency with DOD? So first and foremost point is that transparency on all the activities, steps to create a value to the customer in the form of product increment. The DOD uncovers the transparency, or it brings in the transparency on all the activities or the steps to create a value to the customer. So first thing that I would like to mention over here is we cannot decide, we as a development team or Scrum Master, we cannot decide whether we are creating or delivering value to the customer or not. Though we may say that we have completed all the required things uh, that are to be covered to deliver value, but whether we are delivering value to the customer or not is something only customer can validate. And how can they validate? They can, at first level, they can have a review in the sprint review meetings and give and share the feedback, and at second level they can actually do the testing, and then they can validate whether the value is being delivered or not. So it's the product owner or the business people who can confirm whether we are creating or delivering value to the customer, value to them or not. And coming to DOD, so this DOD brings the transparency on all the steps that are required to create value, which means value steps required to ensure that we are meeting the quality standards, ensure that we are keeping or we have run through all the steps that a product increment for that particular project should typically have. Okay. Second is transparency on your current state of definition of done, and identify the gap between value to the customer and product increment, which means that a DOD or definition of done will give you that transparency or will expose you where are you or what is your uh, definition to this definition of done. That means what according to you is definition of done. So it will it will let you identify that gaps, that whether your understanding on definition of done is correct or not, or what are the gaps that are there, and how can you ensure that gaps are filled. And gaps between what? Gaps between the value that the customer is expecting you to deliver and the value that you are trying to create as a part of product increment. So your definition of done, when you have in place, it will ensure that whether you are meeting or bridging this gap or not. So that is the second level of transparency that it will help you bring in. Third is that transparency on the possible improvements, which will help give you correct definition to your done increment to bring it closer to the valuable product increment. That means the gaps that we have identified or that has been exposed with the DOD, that value, that gap you can fill using this definition of done by improving on some things. And what are those improvements? It could be like earlier you were not performing, say, code reviews. Okay, just an example. So now you have identified that we are not delivering the complete value because there was some miss that has happened, and the reason for that miss is you had not done a thorough code review. So now next time, how are you ensuring that that code review is happening? So you will ensure that you include this point or a step as your definition of done criteria. And then next time when you work on future work items, you will ensure that okay, all your work items are being passed under that code review state. So this is how you can bridge your gaps. So that is the reason why it brings that transparency, that this is your desirable valuable product that the customer is expecting from you, and this is what you're trying to build. What are required, what all are improvements that are required to make it closer to what it should look like, what customer is expecting. So these are the transparencies that it will bring to you, so that you can improve on a timely manner and you can deliver value very effectively. Any questions on this? I know that this is a bit confusing, but if you try to just link it logically, you will understand what transparency we are trying to talk about. And in the further slides, we will also talk about how it will bring that transparency further. So any questions in this? All right, then I'll take it as a no. I'll just move forward. So why is DOD required? So DOD is required to constantly inspect and adapt on product increment. So how are we constantly trying to inspect and adapt? So like I said, that it brings that transparency. It will help us to inspect like we do in retrospectives. It will help us to inspect on what are we following currently and what are the things that we should improve on, so that our quality reaches to the highest level, and whatever we are building for the customer, we are building it with complete quality things in mind, and we are building it right. So it helps us to constantly inspect and adapt. And how will it help, or how will we do that inspect and adapt? Only when we thoroughly follow DOD checklist and not just keep it for our audit purposes. Second is to have transparency on shared understanding of quality of product increment. Why it is creating it, and this is the definition, or this is the uh, purpose of DOD as per the Scrum Guide. The second point, to have transparency on shared understanding of quality of product increment, which means that whichever work items that would contribute to the product increment, all the work items should comply to this definition of done criteria. And by complying to that, we are ensuring that the quality is met, quality standards are met. And with definition of done, we will be creating that transparency. Okay, for this team or for this product increment, this is what a quality standard mean. So everyone who is working towards that product increment should adhere to that quality standards. So that is why it is creating a shared understanding of quality of a product. Third is manage risk of undone work in a sprint. How does DOD manage the risk of undone work, and why there is a risk of undone work at the first place? We are unable to deliver or unable to complete our work, or we have spillovers if there is no complete understanding, if the complete understanding of the requirements is missing. And second possibility is that if we assume things, we did not get that clarity and we are going with assumption. Okay, this means this could be this could be that. The moment we start assuming things, the more is the risk of that product increment increases. So it is very much advisable that we should not assume things and get everything clarified on the work items thoroughly. And the risk of undone work is that we have either not completed all the steps that were required to deliver that value. Second is that either we have not met the quality standards. So how do we do that? All these kind of pending items is something we can retrospect or inspect during our brainstorming sessions or during our retrospectives or whatever. Just sit and retrospect on those items, and then you will come up with the understanding, oh, this user story missed this point, this user story missed this point. So all those points you can just bring in together, and you can include that in your DOD. So that way you would ensure that next time onwards you're managing the risk of incomplete work items. And if you notice in the point number 1 and 2, it shows that it constantly helps us to inspect and adapt, and it allows us to have that transparency. If you notice these 3 points, transparency, inspect and adapt, are part of the empirical process, right? Empiricism that we say in Scrum. So it enables the empiricism. So whenever anyone asks you, or if you want to attend any interview, not just for an interview purpose, or if you want to just teach anyone anything on empiricism, you can definitely say that DOD ensures that we follow the empiricism. So in a nutshell, whatever things are been prescribed in a Scrum framework, right? All of those uh, comply to all the values, principles, Scrum guide, the concepts of empiricism, all of this. So somewhere or the other, you will find these points getting met or fulfilled. So this is how your definition of done is also important for meeting that empiricism perspective as well. So whenever, as I mentioned, whenever asks you, you can definitely give this explanation as well. Okay, so now we have talked about all of this, the characteristics of definition of done. How does your definition of done look like, or why it is required? Now let's come to the point how it should, what it should consist of. This is like the last point in this, and then we will be moving to top tips. So the sample DOD list. So this is not the uh, do all done all list, or this is not the final list. This is what I have just put it across based on whatever I felt it should be. Okay, or whatever that came to my mind. So one of the points could be that code review done, as I've mentioned in the example earlier. It could be one of the points that ensure that all your work items have passed through this code review process. Second is that unit test cases have passed, acceptance test or SIT has passed, or next could be like PO has signed off, as I've mentioned, right? This could be or could not be or may not be part of the DOD list. It really depends upon what is the need of your project and how you want to take it. So if you want that this should be the last thing, that you don't want to worry about the PO sign off separately or seek sign off on the emails or on this tool separately, wherever, you can just include this in the part of the DOD list as well, saying that PO has signed off. So once your PO is signed off, then you can say that you can ship this work item or release this work item into production. So next would be no open bugs. And this is like, this will make most of our lives easier. Many of us face this problem, or many people come to me and ask me, Ramya, what to do if the bugs are outstanding in a user story. So this is what you can do. So when you say that your bugs are outstanding, that means there is a miss. There is a deviation from the expected and actual. That means your team has not worked on it the way it should be. When it is not as per the expectation, or when it's a deviation, and when we say that there is a bug outstanding, then that means we are not completely done with that story, or we are not done with that feature, or whatever you want to call. So in that case, we cannot just overlook this or give that discount saying that it's okay, we will consolidate or keep all the bugs together, and we will do one hardening sprint wherein we will close all the bugs and we can pass this user story. No, again, you will be compromising on the quality. So if you want to ensure that these problems are resolved for once and all, you can put this point as a definition of done criteria, wherein you can mention that you can say your user story is closed only when the outstanding bugs are closed, or there is no open bug attached to that user story. Second, then next point is deploy to UAT. So this could be also say you can close the story only when you are deployed that user story or work item to UAT environment. Then you say that you have deployed it to production, and you can very well ask me that how can we have this point as a definition of done list? Because even if you deploy to production, unless and until you deploy to production, it is not releasable. It is shippable. It is not yet released to production, right? As I mentioned, there is a difference between both of them. There could be some approvals pending. So once you deploy it to production, there is a possibility that there are some outstanding bugs again. So when there are outstanding bugs again, you can go back to and revisit this definition of done. So once you have met all these points, is when we say that, okay, this user story can pass through the quality check and it is of highest quality, and now we can close this work item. So this is what a definition of done list can have. Any questions on this? Anything, any points that you want to raise over here? Or any points you want to add?
Anything about the end user documentation?
Yes, that could also be part of it. Because what happens is I've seen this, that many of the projects, they what they do is after end of every sprint, they do production deployment. Not everyone does that. So once they do the deployment, it is also necessary that to train people, or for an example, even if you do not go till deployment or a production release, even when you have that UAT testing by the UAT testers or business people, they need some support or some documentation to explain that functional flow or workflow. So even in that case, if you don't want to worry on that, who will be writing that, or whether it is maintained or not separately, even from compliance point of view, you can very well add that point that for that work item or for that functionality, if the end user documentation is maintained or not, that very well can be part of your DoD list.
Design reviews?
Definitely. So the way we have written the code review, right? You can definitely add a point before that. Design review should be there, or even in that case, code review also you can again bifurcate that whether you have done a peer review or not, right? Whether you have captured the review comments or not. So all those things can be part of your definition of done list. And once you see with your eyes that all these points are covered, only then you can say that your user story is completed. But whatever you put in your list, that has to be agreed upon by your development team as well.
Thank you, Ramya.
All right. So now coming to last segment, that is the top tips. Yes,
Ramya,
Rohit,
one.
you to cover. Yeah.
Actually, I started a bit late in this session, and this is my first session with you. Actually, I wanted to know about the definition of done is right. Is it feature based, or it's like is ticket based? Means functional user story based.
It's a very good point that you have asked. So I was expecting this question at least from someone. So definition of done should be maintained at a product increment level, right? So product increment level, as in it could be a feature, it could be a epic, or it could be a functionality, or it could be an entire MVP for that matter, or product backlog if you want to say. So, or even sprint backlog, whatever works for you. It should not be at a work item level or a ticket level that you have called out, right? So it should be at a product increment level. So whoever would be working on that product increment should have a same DoD list.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Coming to last point, on this some top tips. How can we maintain effectively? First is frequently revisit DoD list. What do we mean by frequently revisit DoD list? So one thing I would like to just talk about over here is that your DoD list should not be something, a dusty document that is you have maintained it for once in a lifetime. No, it is something that you have to revisit every now and then. And when we say every now and then, it could be once a sprint, once a release, or if you're on safe, once a PI, whatever works for you. But definitely it has to be revisited. And as I mentioned, since DoD ensures transparency on the quality, you have to continuously revisit and make changes to that list. So what is that frequency? is again, that is something that should be mutually decided, but it should be revisited on a timely basis. So ensure that it is not just a dusty document that you are maintaining for an audit purpose, and you are just doing it because someone has asked you, because your program manager has asked you, because your product owner has asked you, and you want to just present it. It is just lying in the conference page, and it has just accumulated dust on it. No, you have to maintain it because you want to follow it, because you want to constantly evolve. Okay. Second tip is that ensure that your DoD emerges by benchmarking future state. That means, as I mentioned, it has to be revisited frequently. That means that your DoD has to emerge the way the requirements emerge in Agile, the way the changes emerge in Agile. Similarly, your DoD list should also emerge. And how do we ensure that DoD is emergent? By seeing that, okay, what is the future state that we want to reach, what is the desirable state of that product increment, and to go there, what all are the changes that we want to make today so that we achieve that future state. So if we can benchmark that and we can make changes to the DoD, then we would be definitely not having any quality issues. You would always deliver a good quality product. Your DoD, and one more point I would like to also add is, there are many organizations, or there are many people who feel that the productivity of your team is decided or is measured with the velocity. No, I would say that your productivity of your team can be measured with the quality of DoD that you write or you maintain. If your DoD is emergent, that means your productivity is also increasing with quality, and your velocity is also changing with changes in the DoD. I can prove you that right away. Just an example, when you had started your project and you thought maybe from this list, okay, initially you had just 3 points, that code review, or maybe I'll not go or talk about code review also. Maybe initially you said that acceptance test should be passed and PO should be signed off, deployed to UAT. If you had written only 3 points as a definition of done, and you have ensured that all your work items have adhered to that list, tomorrow, after there are some changes in the requirements, after there are some expectations from the client side on few of the product increment items, you come back and make your DoD list emergent. Okay. And your team was working with certain velocity with, say, the 3 points that we discussed. And now tomorrow, when you increase this list, or when you revisit this list and add few more items, this time you realize that, okay, now I'm going to add unit test cases as well as a part of my DoD list, and say PO sign off also I am going to add. Now instead of 3, you have added 5 items. Obviously, to ensure that your work items are meeting all these 5 points, more efforts would be required, or more time would be required, or maybe uncertainties would be required. So obviously the estimation or time taken for you by your team to complete one work item would be more, or more story points would be given to ensure all of these 5 points. So in that case, your velocity would not be same as before. Earlier you might be doing more velocity or churning out more story points of work. Now it could be less, or a vice versa, whatever it could be. So your velocity should not be measure of the productivity. The definition of done list might turn the tables around in terms of capturing the velocity. So you cannot or you cannot guaranteely say that your teams are high performing if the velocity is only going on increasing exponentially. No, if you're not delivering a quality product, that means you're not delivering the product, valuable product to the customer, or a sustainable product to the customer. And how do you ensure that you are delivering quality product? by your definition of done. That is the reason why your definition of done cannot be constant. It should be always emergent. Okay. Next is ensure DOD is met by adding DOD in the statuses of work item. This is a trick that I would like to give you, and which I have implemented in my projects, and it worked for me. You can try as well and let me know if that works for you as well. What you can do is, whichever tool that you are using for your project manager, it could be Azure DevOps, it could be Rally, it could be Jira or whatever, or Trello, any tool, TFS, any tool that you might be using for every work item, be it feature, be it user story, or be it epic. There are different statuses for that user story in a tool, right? Or different statuses for that work item. For an example, just to give you the context, like whenever a user story is open, it is in new status, right? Then it goes to open or active, then it goes to in progress, then it goes to maybe testing, then it goes to closed. Basically the life cycle of a work item. So in that life cycle, or as a part of that statuses, you can very well include your definition of done criteria or checklist as well. For an example, if you want to just see, you can include one status as code review passed or code review. Next, unit test cases passed, accept SIT passed, or maybe you want to say that PO signed off, deploy to UAT, deploy to production. All these you can include as a status itself, so that you are ensuring that your definition of done is also met. You are revisiting, you are adhering to definition of done, plus your story is not moving further if any of the points are not met, because that is the life cycle of a work item in a tool. This I have implemented in the past, and that works really well. So you can try out and see for your teams as well, so that your quality standards are met. Next is maintain single DOD for a product increment. The point that I have spoken about some time back, and that can really work well. I mean, that it's not that it can work well, that should be the case, that your single DOD checklist should be maintained for entire product increment. So you may ask that, what if there are multiple teams involved to work on a single product increment? Even in that case, if there are multiple teams involved, even in that case, you can have a single DOD for all the team members, or for all the teams, all the Scrum teams. But only change over here is, if whenever you are writing defining the definition of done criteria, ensure that all the teams are involved in writing the definition of them. Otherwise, you can very well have a single DOD for this as well. Last point for this topic today is include NFRs as a part of your DOD too. NFRs means non-functional requirements. And what could be non-functional requirements for your work item in a product increment? Those are maybe performance improvements, or cyber security check, or maybe load testing. All these points become your non-functional requirements. So just imagine you are working on a website, or let me give the example of IRCTC. IRCTC is the online ticketing site, right? Ticket booking site for railways, right? So imagine now you want to book a ticket, and you all very well know that what is the performance of that site. Even two of your family members try to log in with different account at the same time, the site gives you an answer there itself. It will just load for you for ages. So if you're going to deliver some product with such poor performance, imagine, will that help customer in any way? Though customer has not asked explicitly, but that's a common sense for us, right? That if you're delivering something, the performance of that particular product should be really good. It should not just crash, or it should not just be slowed with maybe so and so number of users. So those all becomes your part of, those all become your non-functional requirements. So to ensure that these things are handled, you can include those points as well in your definition of done. I think that's it from my end for this topic today. Anything that you would want to know or any questions that you may have? Anything from anyone?
Ramya, I have a question. So suppose means it happened sometime back in my project. So so there was a story in which all the acceptance criteria and everything was met, but the tester came across a scenario which was failing, and it was due to that ticket. So in the definition of then we were checking the acceptance criteria and no bug should be open. But in the acceptance criteria it was not mentioned. Okay. So how to deal in such cases? So for that scenario, what we did, we moved the ticket to close and made the bug ticket as a new user story. But is it the right way?
Okay, so what I understand is that the acceptance criteria itself did not talk about it, right? So in that case, that means that we have not done the impact analysis properly on that user story or a work item, or the requirements itself was not completely clear. And the product owner did not pay attention to certain areas which were missing. So definitely in this case, we cannot blame any one person, like so and so quality person did not take care of it, or maybe we did not perform well, both from development and developer and tester together. But it is something that a lesson learned for the team, that next time onwards we have to do a thorough impact analysis and we have to think through all the options. And if product owner is not coming up with such points, because it is quite possible that even product owner might have missed something, but we should ensure that we ask right questions so that we get right answers. All right, any other question, anything that you would want to add? Vivek, would you want to add anything? Any point from you?
Uh, no, Ramya, I guess you have already covered it. Just on the last point, which was a concern or question, is like I just wanted to add is the acceptance criteria would always be a subset of the definition of done. The definition of done would always be a set, but then the acceptance criteria, irrespective of what it is specific to a user story or to a work item, it will always be a subset of uh, the DoD. So that is what I mean. First, the story needs to meet the acceptance criteria, but then overall, as when we can confirm or where we can say that this is a shippable product, to ensure that to confirm on that shippable product, it has to meet the definition of done. There cannot be a if or but in that confirmation. So that is I just wanted to add.
Yes, that's a really good point, I must say. Yes, it's the subset of the DoD. I hope we answered you, Ambalika.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else from anyone, or are we good?
I have one last question, Ramya.
Sure.
Suppose we are discussing for definition of done for user stories. So how we can differentiate if it is for sprint or for release?
That's what. So it's up to us how you want to take it. If that a release or a sprint is part of that same product increment, then you can have a same DoD. If it is a different product increment, ideally we should not be the case, because if you're saying that you're working on two different products, then we are compromising on the Scrum rule itself. So if you are working on the same product increment, you can have same definition of done list at a sprint level also. And maybe if you feel that in last sprint we had not catered to few points, and this time you want to add some new points to the definition of done, then definitely you can revisit your definition of done criteria in the next sprint, but ensure that you adhere to that list throughout the sprint and do not change it every now and then in the middle of the sprint.
Thank you, Ramya.
All right. If nothing else, then I think we can close the call today. Thank you everyone for joining the session today, and have a nice weekend. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
weekend to all of
Thanks,
you.
Ramya.
Thanks, Ramya.
Thank you very much. Amazing. Thank you.